Good morning. I am Reverend Montclair. Today is January 29th, 2024, and this is Monday Church with Reverend Montclair. Today my message is titled Bless Your Heart, and it goes like this. Bless your heart is a phrase I heard throughout my youth and my young adulthood. These words were uttered by my grandmother, and she meant it, unlike, as I have been told, some folks who use this phrase sarcastically in a derogatory manner, but in an elusively cheerful and sweet tone of voice. Bless your heart is a kind thing to say when you mean it. It is even more empowering when you choose to use this phrase as a touchstone, a directive of how to live your life. Bless your heart means not only a blessing upon your physical heart, but your spiritual one as well, as in blessings upon what your heart is drawn to in its infinite wisdom. Yes, that kind of blessing. Imagine with me now if all decisions you make in your life are evaluated from this perspective. Does this choice bless my heart or not? And if not, you don't choose it. You ask instead, what choice do I have before me that does bless my heart? Then listen deeply and trust in the reply. I say reply as if there is a voice to be heard, and there may be for some people, that still small voice inside. And too often they ignore it. But for others, the answer may come with a strong feeling in the gut, or for others still, a visual representation witnessed in the natural world or the dream state. I can't tell you how you receive your intuition, also known as divine guidance. I just know your life will be infinitely more purpose-driven once you learn to decipher its language. Because deciphering your intuition's language can be helpful to live from your heart. And living from your heart is the path of passion, of aliveness, of abundance and possibility, of divine connection to all. And who doesn't want to live that kind of life? There may be a collective of curmudgeons that swear that a passion-filled life of enthusiasm and divine connection is not what they want, mostly because they don't believe it's possible. Maybe they have never tasted it. Maybe they have, and the loss of it was too much to bear. Maybe the idea of divinity does not resonate with them. Still, in their heart of hearts, the place they protect with their cynicism, I am certain that kind of life, whatever words or ideas we use to describe it, is desired, even if that desire is willed into silent isolation. And it is that kind of will deployed against the heart that gets at the heart of what I am addressing here. And yes, I am choosing my militaristic adjective consciously. I am fighting for the survival of the life of the heart in a culture that finds it more efficient and profitable to kill it off. Just look around at all the ways our culture promotes deadening of the heart, from heart-clogging corporate foodstuffs engineered to be addictive, to the empathy-deadening political rhetoric, boundaries, and policy. The gun lobby alone is enough to raise all alarms in a civilized society. Truly, the lack of empathy in much of today's society is just the tip of the iceberg. The icy-hearted executives heading multinational corporations affecting our bottom line of economic survival or sabotage see the world in numbers and profit, not hearts and souls and lives disrupted, impoverished, or ruined by their anti-human, anti-earth policies and decisions. Collateral damage is what it is called in war. The unintended consequences that no one intentionally tries to avoid. All is fair in love in war is the age-old saying justifying abhorrent, rampant selfishness and cruelty. Pair this with the newly emergent phrase amongst the privileged capitalists and or privileged wannabes, greed is good. Add in the flurry of current articles and self-help commentary from even some of the big names in the human potential movement on why selfishness is good, and we have a culture at ease with justifying a lack of compassion. Yes, self-care is good, self-respect is good, self-esteem is good, self-worth is good, self-direction is good, and self-reflection is good. And none of that is inherently selfish. But unfortunately, that is what our culture has led us to believe, to feel guilty about, because unless you are working yourself half to death for the corporate overlords or for one's family to afford the commercial American dream, we will label you as selfish. This comes from the life-denying, sacrificial aspect of Christian doctrine, manipulated in our culture for others' gain, for corporate gain, or in the name of, we did it this way, so should you. The phrase selfish is good is becoming the buzzword that self-esteem was in the 80s. One reason selfish is being used counter to the word's definition and meaning is that it is a little shocking, provocative. It feels naughty and enticing, indulgent. A pressure relief valve for all the goody-good we tried to be for so long that seems to have gotten us nowhere near where we wanted to be. We still got criticized. We still got taken advantage of. We still didn't get credit where credit was due. We are still not earning what we are worth, and often far less so. We were still treated as disposable. We still felt guilty. Some would blame this on our sins while they disguised their wins in false piety. But when we witness overt sin practiced regularly by some unscrupulous folks and find that somehow our culture rewards those amoral individuals with material success and financial abundance, we may start to question our own values or discard them altogether. Why not? Everybody, it seems, if you watch TV, is doing it. You too can jump on the to hell in a handbasket high-speed train of thought. Next stop, Mars. Get yours while you can, and if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. After all, we can't stop this wild runaway train, or can we? Religion and fear have been used by the powers that be for centuries to manipulate the majority, those masses of people in society with far less or no apparent power. I say apparent because we, the majority, have more power and agency than we realize. It is in the ruling class's best interest, however, to convince the rest of us of our powerlessness, like victims of the system, whether that system is religious or social. As if the system is rigged against us, because the system is rigged. Yet, in truth, we are all co-creators of this present reality when we allow fears to be instilled and magnified by the media. We become easy to control. The burning question in a capitalist society is, are we, the masses, buying it? And if we are not buying it, whatever it is, hook, line, and sinker, then more questions follow. The most demonic and inscrutable of these questions is, can we make it addictive? The answer to that question, from cigarettes to Facebook and video games, is yes, and it's legal. We in the United States still have many entrenched values based on our puritanical, patriarchal roots. These values continue to be exploited and used to shame and deny the life of the heart. Generations of all peoples, including the ones in power, have been encouraged to deny feelings, intuition, compassion, our very connection to nature and to each other. Instead, we are encouraged to externalize our power, sacrifice to an external god or social structure like capitalism. The life of the Sacred Heart, the indwelling place of the divine, as experienced through family values, compassion, care, fairness, equality, respect, intuition, and honor, is co-opted for selfishness, power, and oppression when spoken of in politically misconstrued allegories, military and corporate ads, and policy to justify exclusion, extraction, genocide, profit over people, and the destruction of nature and nature-honoring civilizations. For example, there is no such thing as a holy war. Despite its Darwinian origin, survival of the fittest is our marching order in America, even of those who disbelieve evolution. This maxim, when employed within the anti-human, anti-heart culture of our capitalist society, really means survival of the richest, where any means justifies the ends. Here I pause to suggest, as sustaining life on Earth at the current pace of business-as-usual practices falls further into doubt, that we may benefit from redefining the word survival instead of the word selfish. The practice in a capitalist patriarchal society, masquerading as a traditional Christian society, is to uphold male dominance, where women do not rate as valuable or having authority or even agency. Instead, women have been expected to perform the heart-contorting acts of self-effacement, self-denial, and subservient, dependent behavior to males, including in sexual contexts. In this American historically white male-dominated society, people of color of both sexes have been treated similarly. The expectation is submission, obedience, erasure of the autonomous self, ensuring non-competition in all areas. Today, when white privilege is spoken of by people of color, and many financially underprivileged white males react negatively, and white females know they too have been subjected to disenfranchisement of power and autonomy, and quite frankly, femicide, simply because they are female in a patriarchy. We need to recognize the subtlety of privilege and the consequences of lack of representation in our culture. We can be privileged in one area and discriminated in another, or even discriminated in many areas. The privilege we of light skin mostly embody in America is to not be discriminated against just because of our skin color by those in positions of power, which is no small perk in life. As more and more of our young men and women have been sent off to unjustifiable wars in far-flung places, only to return, if they do, after completing more tours than they signed up for, with more trauma than they can deal with, more trauma even than society can or is willing to deal with. We have a culture brimming with the damage caused by a denial of the heart, our humanness, our vulnerability, our wounds, our needs, our connectedness. And instead of dealing with these issues head on, or even better, the cause of these issues, our leaders of our capitalist society justify the collateral damage. because it's not short-term profitable to care for the wounded, the broken, the addicted, the mentally ill, the sufferers of PTSD, as long as the top 1% and even the top 10% is richer than ever before. They are silent. Similarly, with our education system geared towards only 10% achieving top grades, while the rest fall by the wayside into mediocrity or failure. Teachers get blamed, but truly it is the education system that was designed to create low-paid workers out of the 90% of those who learn differently than rote memorization. The assumption in both cases is the system is working because it works for those at the top. How heartless is that? And this is my point. In order to justify treating others as collateral damage, as dehumanized pawns in society's war games, I am richer than you games, or even more other personal conquests, such as young trophy wives in matters of love, the perpetrators of such a culture must be cut off from their hearts. They too are victims of our culture, of their socialization in childhood, even as they victimize others. This vicious cycle is self-perpetuating. This runaway train of damage cannot be stopped until the root causes are addressed. Instead of being a role model or mentor for the next generation, as a caring, compassionate, healthy male would be, the broken-hearted connection of the heart connection of the power of the in-power male intentionally removes and cripples, often literally, the competition posed by young men by making laws or policies that send them off to war or prison. This in-power male also is invested in removing the threat of the caring, family-oriented, intelligent woman, crippling her through unequal pay if she is hired at all, lax rape laws, and lack of equal representation in government. The in-power male most often chooses the much younger mate, not only for the external status of presumed prowess, but also to be in a position of authority that age and monetary control afford. Control of the female body and choices related to pregnancy or birth is one more patriarchal card to be played by the in-power male cut off from his heart, as once again, religion is used to justify this power play. No matter that Jesus nor the Bible spoke of abortion, and that the Catholic Church ban on abortion only began 154 years ago. In a culture informed by generational damage, instead of fulfilling the role of the male as prescribed by nature to protect the female mate and their offspring, males with this heart deficit and ego deficit instead treat the female like an enemy, abusing her physically and emotionally if she questions or challenges his authority, his decisions, his values that are apparently anything but family values, evidenced by the all too common practice of domestic violence where spouses and children are abused, abandoned, and even killed by the father. Once again, our capitalist culture, with a focus on profit over people, is complicit in this abuse when we allow the media of news, movies, commercials, comic books, and video games to promote the myth of the strong man as one being angry, violent, in control, out of touch with his emotions, a man to respect, meaning obey. Never mind that the opposite is true of these so-called strong men. They are afraid. They are cowardly. They are vulnerable, addicted. They are damaged and perpetrate damage. Because someone, somewhere, is profiting insidiously from this. Because damaged, angry, broken young men from broken homes, from poverty, who feel like they do not belong in a culture they cannot seem to succeed in, those with nothing to look forward to in their lives, make excellent soldiers. The heart always leads us to compassion and connection. Always. The head, uninformed by the heart, most often leads us to disconnection and fear of the other, fear of losing status, fear of losing power, fear of even of losing ourselves because we have over-identified with the externals. Defense of the ego, our child self, that by necessity is selfish to ensure survival when at our most vulnerable as children, is all too present even in many adults. Because when this child self does not get what it needs as a child, the perceived deficit follows one throughout adulthood unless significant work is done on the self to repair the damage and fill the empty well of our broken heart. I assert that outright selfishness does not fill this well, though many may try this route. I argue against it as a cure-all for today's society. It reinforces instead the inner soul's knowing that we are out of balance, creating more damage from our own refusal to see, own, and heal the damage inflicted on us in subtle and not subtle ways by the adults in our childhood, thus increasing our sense of shame and deepening our denial. Because the soul always keeps track, whether we are conscious of this or not. As is often the case in an unexamined life, we become most like the abusers that we were victimized by. This is how sexual abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse gets perpetrated by the victims. This, we think, gives us power. A person's brain that endured trauma, aka trauma brain, is different from people not raised in trauma. The black and white thinking typical of this mindset rooted in the brain stem is that I am either the abused or the abuser. I am either in charge or oppressed. Often empathy is lacking in those with a trauma brain because survival is the only focus where everything and everyone is seen as a threat. And fight or flight is perceived as the only solution. If our adults did not show us empathy as children, but the lack of this trait, what do we learn of empathy? Nothing. Those without empathy behave as monsters because they do not have the ability to self-reflect, to understand how others feel in relation to their actions, words, or lack of action. Blame is placed squarely on the other. There is, however, hope. Empathy can be taught. Schools in Denmark are proficient in this, where empathy is taught as a necessary skill from preschool till the age of 16. If empathy is ever taught at all in our American schools, it is by the example of a rogue, compassionate teacher not following the approved curriculum. In America, instead of a focus on progressive education towards the mental health of our populace, let alone the conscious education of the heart or emotions, the trending emphasis is currently on entrenching the disparity of power that white males have over women and people of color. This heartless norm has existed in this country since its founding. The U.S., a bastard child of Great Britain, did not fall far from the elitist family tree. To distract the American public from the awareness of the inherent dishonesty in our stated American values of freedom and equality, the powers that be invest in relentless commercials, rhetoric, and entertainment that portray U.S. as the greatest country in the world, even if we are simultaneously being coerced into buying whatever it is being sold that we are told represents that greatness, like guns. Meanwhile, our standing amongst all nations in the areas of quality of life, happiness, education, mental and physical health, and even safety has fallen dramatically. Why are we surprised in a society that has no real emphasis on supporting families or child development, care, or nurturing, that our children are killing each other, especially when our children are incessantly exposed to increasingly violent content in video games, movies, advertising, and internet chat rooms, with no real censure of this content for young children and teens by parents and society alike. This is a disturbing trend with disturbingly obvious results: depression, mass shootings, mass school shootings, suicide, and addiction. When is enough enough? When does wisdom prevail? When do we choose to heal this collective deficit in our heart connection? When will children killing children shock us out of our complacency, out of our complicitness? When will we no longer tolerate our children being treated as nothing more than the means to fat the coffers of the richest by being groomed unawares to be fodder for the money-hungry corporate war machine? When we decide to live from our hearts. Bless your heart. It is the path to reclaiming our humanity. Remember, love is in the details. May you walk in beauty, with beauty before you, with beauty behind you, with beauty above, with beauty below, with beauty all around you. May you walk. Blessed be.